The last thing Yuan Feng remembered before everything went dark was the horrified screech of truck tires against wet pavement and the small orange kitten tumbling safely onto the sidewalk. He supposed that if he had to die at 17, at least he had saved a life, even if it was just a tiny furry one. But when his eyes opened again, the first thing he noticed was that he was not lying on a hospital bed or floating in some endless void. Instead, he was staring up at an ornate wooden ceiling decorated with painted cranes and clouds that looked like they belonged in an ancient palace. Yuan Feng sat up quickly, his head spinning with confusion. The room around him was nothing like his small apartment back home. Silk curtains hung from the windows, embroidered with golden phoenixes. The bed beneath him was massive, with posts carved from dark wood and draped in fine fabrics. A bronze mirror stood in the corner, and scrolls covered in elegant calligraphy lined the walls. Everything looked expensive and old-fashioned, like something from those historical dramas his mother loved watching. He stumbled out of bed and nearly tripped over the hem of the long blue robe he was somehow wearing. Blue robes? Yuan Feng looked down at himself in shock. Gone were his school uniform and sneakers. Instead, he wore layers of flowing silk tied with an intricate silver belt. His hands looked the same but somehow different. Younger maybe? Smoother? He rushed to the bronze mirror and his breath caught in his throat. The face staring back at him was his own, yet not quite. The features were sharper, more refined, like someone had taken his regular appearance and turned up the beauty settings. His hair, which had always been a boring short crop, now fell past his shoulders in a sleek black waterfall. But what really made his heart stop was the small silver pin holding back some of his hair, shaped like a sword crossed with a crane. He knew that pin. He had just seen it yesterday in the web novel he had been reading on his phone during lunch break. The Heavenly Sword Sect's senior disciple pin. Yuan Feng's hands started shaking as memories that were not his own began flooding his mind like water breaking through a dam. He saw himself, or rather this body's original owner, training with a sword in a mountain courtyard. He saw himself sneering at younger students, calling them worthless and weak. He saw himself obsessively following around a beautiful boy with kind eyes, mocking him, pushing him, making his life miserable out of twisted jealousy. And he saw the cliff. The terrible cliff where, in exactly 3 months according to the timeline, he would be pushed to his supposed death after being framed for attacking that same junior disciple. This could not be happening. Yuan Feng pressed his palms against his eyes, trying to wake up from what had to be a bizarre dream. But when he opened them again, he was still in that fancy room wearing those fancy robes with those fancy memories swirling in his head like a storm he could not escape. A knock on the door made him jump. A young servant girl peeked her head in, looking nervous. Senior disciple Yuan, Master Jiang Wei has summoned all disciples to the training grounds for the morning session. You should not be late. Yuan Feng opened his mouth and almost said, "You dare," which was apparently the original Yuan Feng's favorite phrase for everything, but he caught himself just in time. "Thank you. I will be there shortly," he managed to say instead. The servant girl looked surprised by his polite tone but bowed and left quickly. As soon as she was gone, Yuan Feng started pacing the room like a caged tiger. His mind raced through everything he remembered about the story. The Heavenly Sword Sect's Rise was a popular online novel about Shen Yue, a talented but humble young cultivator who joined a prestigious martial arts sect and rose through the ranks despite facing bullying and challenges. The main villain in the early chapters was Yuan Feng, the jealous senior disciple who could not stand that someone younger and newer was more talented than him. The original Yuan Feng was written as a one-dimensional bully who only existed to make the protagonist look good before getting his comeuppance at Moon Cliff. But Yuan Feng knew something the original story never explored. He knew that the real villain was not the jealous senior brother, but Liang Chen, Yuan Feng's so-called best friend. In Chapter 10, Liang Chen would trick Yuan Feng into going to the cliff, push him off, and then tell everyone that Yuan Feng had attacked both him and Shen Yue in a jealous rage. The sect would believe Liang Chen because Yuan Feng had been such a terrible person that the accusation seemed perfectly believable. Shen Yue would feel guilty but accept it as truth. And Yuan Feng would be written out of the story, presumably dead. Except the story never showed what happened after the fall. The novel just moved on to Shen Yue's next adventure. Yuan Feng had always thought that was lazy writing, but now that he was living it, the idea of falling off a cliff in 3 months was absolutely terrifying. He had to change the story. He had to survive. And more than that, he had to figure out why he was even here in the first place. Was this some kind of cosmic punishment? A second chance? A really elaborate coma dream? Yuan Feng found the original body sword hanging on the wall, a beautiful weapon with a jade handle and silver blade. He strapped it to his belt, trying to remember the memories of how to use it. Thankfully, the original Yuan Feng had been skilled with a sword, even if his personality had been garbage. The muscle memory was there, flowing through his arms and legs like it had always belonged to him. Taking a deep breath, Yuan Feng stepped out of his room and into the hallway. The Heavenly Sword sect was even more beautiful than he had imagined while reading. The buildings were traditional architecture with curved roofs and red pillars. Gardens bloomed with flowers he had never seen before, and stone paths wound between training yards where disciples practiced their forms. Mountains rose in the distance, their peaks hidden in mist, and the air smelled like pine and morning dew. Other disciples passed him in the hallway, and Yuan Feng noticed how they all stepped aside quickly, their eyes lowered. Some looked afraid. Others looked resentful. One younger boy actually flinched when Yuan Feng accidentally made eye contact. The original Yuan Feng had clearly made himself hated by everyone, and that reputation now hung around the new Yuan Feng's neck like a stone. The training grounds were a massive open courtyard paved with smooth stones. Dozens of disciples in blue robes stood in neat rows, all holding their swords and waiting for the master to arrive. Yuan Feng spotted an empty space near the front where senior disciples apparently stood and made his way there, feeling dozens of eyes tracking his movement. That was when he saw Shen Yue for the first time. The boy stood 3 rows back, his dark hair tied in a simple ponytail, his robes neat and clean despite being less fancy than the senior disciples' clothing. He had a gentle face with soft features, but his eyes held a determination that made him stand out from everyone else. When he noticed Yuan Feng looking at him, those eyes widened slightly with what looked like fear, and he quickly looked down at his feet. Yuan Feng's heart twisted painfully. In the original story, Shen Yue was supposed to be the hero, the good person who overcame adversity. But the web novel had been written from his perspective, which meant Yuan Feng had never really seen how the bullying affected him. Seeing that flash of fear on Shen Yue's face now, seeing him literally trying to make himself smaller and invisible, made Yuan Feng realize just how cruel the original body's owner had been. He wanted to apologize right there, wanted to tell Shen Yue that things would be different now. But he knew that would only seem suspicious and weird. Instead, Yuan Feng simply looked away and pretended to adjust his sword, his mind already working on a plan. Master Jiang Wei arrived moments later, a tall elderly man with a long white beard and robes decorated with gold thread. His presence commanded instant respect, and every disciple bowed deeply. Yuan Feng bowed too, grateful that at least some behaviors were instinctive thanks to the borrowed memories. Disciples of the Heavenly Sword sect. Master Jiang Wei's voice carried across the courtyard like wind through bamboo. Today we continue our training in the flowing river technique. Pair up with someone of similar rank and begin your practice forms. I will observe and offer guidance. The courtyard immediately filled with movement as disciples rushed to find partners. Yuan Feng noticed how people avoided him, leaving a wide empty circle around his spot. The loneliness of it struck him harder than expected. The original Yuan Feng might have thrived on fear and distance, but the new Yuan Feng just felt sad and isolated. Then he heard a quiet voice behind him. Senior disciple Yuan, if you have no partner, perhaps we could practice together. Yuan Feng turned around and found himself face to face with Shen Yue. Up close, the junior disciple was even more striking, with delicate features that would probably make him handsome as he grew older. But more than his appearance, what caught Yuan Feng's attention was the brave determination in his eyes despite the nervousness in his voice. Shen Yue was offering to practice with the person who had made his life miserable, probably because no one else would partner with Yuan Feng, and leaving a senior disciple without a partner would be disrespectful to the sect. This was it. This was Yuan Feng's chance to start changing the story. Yuan Feng stood perfectly still in the moonlit courtyard, his sword held loosely at his side as he watched Shen Yue practice the new technique Master Jiang Wei had taught them that afternoon. 2 months had passed since that first training session where Shen Yue had nervously offered to be his partner, and in that time, everything had changed in ways Yuan Feng had never anticipated when he first woke up in this strange world. The junior disciple moved through the forms with growing confidence, his blade cutting through the air in silver arcs that caught the light like falling stars. Yuan Feng found himself smiling without meaning to, his chest warming with an emotion he had not expected to feel so strongly. They had become friends. Real friends. After that first awkward practice session where Shen Yue had clearly expected to be insulted or humiliated, Yuan Feng had simply corrected his form politely and offered genuine advice. The shock on Shen Yue's face had been almost comical. The next day Yuan Feng had saved him a seat at breakfast. The day after that, he had complimented Shen Yue's improvement in front of other disciples. Small gestures, each one chipping away at the wall of fear and resentment that the original Yuan Feng had built between them. Slowly, carefully, Shen Yue had begun to trust him. They started eating meals together regularly. They studied ancient sword manuals side by side in the library. They took walks through the sect's gardens, talking about everything from cultivation techniques to their dreams for the future. Yuan Feng learned that Shen Yue loved poetry and often stayed up late writing verses by candlelight. Shen Yue discovered that Yuan Feng, despite his serious demeanor, had a terrible sense of direction and once got lost trying to find the meditation hall he had visited 100 times. But as their friendship deepened into something that felt increasingly like more than friendship, Yuan Feng became aware of dark eyes watching them from the shadows. Liang Qin, his supposed best friend, had begun showing up wherever they went with perfect timing that could not be coincidence. If Yuan Feng and Shen Yue were studying in the library, Liang Qin would appear with tea and sweet words. If they were walking in the gardens, Liang Qin would join them uninvited, inserting himself between them physically and conversationally. His smile was always bright and his words always friendly, but Yuan Feng could see the calculation behind those eyes, the way Liang Qin's jaw tightened whenever Shen Yue laughed at something Yuan Feng said. The original memories Yuan Feng had inherited showed him that Liang Qin had been his closest companion since childhood, the one person who had always stood by his side even when Yuan Feng was at his worst. But now, armed with knowledge of how the story was supposed to go, Yuan Feng could see the truth those memories had missed. Liang Qin had never been a true friend. He had been a manipulator, encouraging Yuan Feng's worst behaviors, feeding his jealousy and anger, all while positioning himself as the reasonable, kind alternative. When the time came to push Yuan Feng off that cliff, Liang Qin would do it without hesitation because Yuan Feng was simply a tool that had outlived its usefulness. Shen Yue finished his practice form and turned to Yuan Feng with a bright smile that made something flutter dangerously in Yuan Feng's chest. "How was that, senior brother? I think I finally understood what Master Jiang Wei meant about letting the energy flow rather than forcing it." Yuan Feng nodded, trying to ignore the way his heart beat faster when Shen Yue called him senior brother in that warm, affectionate tone. "Much better. Your footwork has improved significantly. You are a fast learner." Pink-colored Shen Yue's cheeks, visible even in the moonlight. "Only because I have a good teacher." He walked over to where Yuan Feng stood, close enough that their sleeves almost touched. "I made osmanthus cakes this afternoon. Would you like some? I saved the best ones for you." Before Yuan Feng could answer, a familiar voice cut through the peaceful moment like a blade through silk. "How sweet." The senior and junior disciples sharing a midnight training session. "Should I be worried you are planning something secretive?" Liang Qin emerged from behind one of the courtyard pillars, his expression friendly but his tone carrying an edge that made Yuan Feng's instincts scream danger. He was tall and handsome in a sharp way, with clever eyes and a smile that probably charmed most people. Yuan Feng had once considered that smile trustworthy, but now it looked like a mask hiding something rotten underneath. Shen Yue stepped back quickly, proper distance reasserting itself between them. "Brother Liang. We were just practicing the new technique. Senior brother Yuan has been kind enough to help me improve." Liang Chen's smile tightened almost imperceptibly. "How generous of him. Though I wonder, Yuan Feng, what changed? You spent months making Junior Shen's life difficult, and now suddenly you are his devoted teacher. Forgive me for finding it suspicious." Yuan Feng met Liang Chen's gaze steadily, refusing to look away. "People can change, Liang Chen. Perhaps you should try it sometime." The temperature in the courtyard seemed to drop several degrees. Liang Chen's smile never wavered, but something cold and dangerous flashed through his eyes. "Of course. Change is wonderful. I just hope Junior Shen knows to be careful. Leopards and spots, as they say." Shen Yue frowned, stepping slightly in front of Yuan Feng in an unconscious protective gesture that made Yuan Feng's breath catch. "Senior brother Yuan has been nothing but kind to me. Whatever he was like before, he has proven himself to be a good person now. I trust him." Those words, spoken with such simple conviction, hit Yuan Feng harder than any sword strike. Shen Yue trusted him. Despite everything the original Yuan Feng had done, despite months of cruelty and bullying, Shen Yue had opened his heart and chosen to believe in the possibility of change. The weight of that trust settled on Yuan Feng's shoulders like a sacred duty. Liang Chen's expression flickered with something ugly before smoothing back into pleasantness. "How touching. Well, I will leave you two to your practice. Yuan Feng, do not forget we have plans to meet tomorrow evening. I found something interesting I want to show you near Moon Cliff. Something that might help with Master Jiang Wei's illness." Every muscle in Yuan Feng's body went tense. Moon Cliff, the place where he was supposed to die. The timeline was happening exactly as the story predicted. which meant tomorrow evening was when Liang Chen planned to push him off the edge and frame him for attacking Shen Yue. The casual way Liang Chen mentioned it, like he was inviting Yuan Feng to tea instead of murder, made Yuan Feng's stomach turn with disgust. But he forced himself to smile and nod. Of course. I will meet you there at sunset. Liang Chen looked surprised, like he had expected Yuan Feng to refuse or question. Excellent. I will see you both tomorrow then. He bowed slightly to Shen Yue, completely ignoring Yuan Feng now, and disappeared back into the shadows from which he had come. As soon as he was gone, Shen Yue turned to Yuan Feng with worry clear on his face. Are you sure you should go? Something about Brother Liang feels wrong lately. He watches you like a hawk watches a rabbit. Yuan Feng wanted to tell Shen Yue everything. He wanted to explain about the story, about the betrayal that was coming, about how Liang Chen was planning to destroy both of them. But how could he explain without sounding insane? Instead, he reached out and gently squeezed Shen Yue's shoulder, feeling the warmth of him through the silk robes. I will be careful. I promise. But I need you to do something for me. Shen Yue nodded immediately, his trust absolute in a way that made Yuan Feng's heart ache. Anything. Find Mei Lin tomorrow evening and tell her I asked you both to come to Moon Cliff 1 hour after sunset. Do not come alone and do not tell anyone else where you are going. Can you do that for me? Confusion clouded Shen Yue's expression, but he agreed without argument. I do not understand, but yes. I will do as you ask. He hesitated, then added quietly, Please be safe, senior brother. I do not know what I would do if something happened to you. The vulnerability in those words, the raw emotion barely hidden beneath them, made Yuan Feng throw caution aside. He pulled Shen Yue into a brief hug, feeling the younger boy stiffen in surprise before slowly relaxing against him. Nothing will happen to me, Yuan Feng whispered against Shen Yue's hair, breathing in the scent of jasmine and ink that always clung to him. I promise you that. When they separated, both their faces were flushed and neither could quite meet the other's eyes. Shen Yue mumbled something about getting those osmanthus cakes and fled toward his quarters, leaving Yuan Feng alone in the moonlit courtyard with his racing thoughts and pounding heart. The next day passed in agonizing slowness. Yuan Feng went through his normal routine, attending lessons and practice sessions, but his mind was constantly working through his plan. He had changed so much of the story already that he could not be certain events would unfold exactly as written, but he had to prepare for the worst. During lunch, he quietly told Mei Lin about the meeting at Moon Cliff, trusting her because the original memories showed she had always been kind even when Yuan Feng did not deserve it. She promised to bring Shen Yue exactly when Yuan Feng asked, her eyes sharp with understanding even though he had not explained everything. As the sun began its descent toward the horizon, painting the sky in shades of orange and gold, Yuan Feng made his way to Moon Cliff. The path wound through dense forest, growing narrower and more treacherous as he climbed higher up the mountain. He could hear a river rushing somewhere below, its roar growing louder as he approached the cliff's edge. Finally, the trees opened up to reveal a dramatic overlook where the mountain dropped away into nothing, a sheer fall of hundreds of feet to the rocky river below. Liang Chen was already waiting, standing near the edge with his hands clasped behind his back like he was admiring the view. He turned when he heard Yuan Feng approach and his smile was bright and welcoming. Yuan Feng, thank you for coming. The view from here is spectacular, is it not? I always thought this would be a poetic place for important moments. Yuan Feng stopped several feet away, keeping distance between them and the cliff edge. You said you found something for Master Jiang Wei's illness? Liang Chen laughed, a sound like breaking glass. Did you really believe that? Come now, Yuan Feng. You are not that stupid. The friendly mask finally dropped away completely, revealing the cold calculation beneath. I will be honest since we are alone. I have loved Shen Yue since the moment he arrived at this sect. His kindness, his talent, his beautiful gentle soul. I have waited patiently, knowing that eventually he would notice me and return my feelings. Yuan Feng's hand moved to his sword hilt. And then I changed and became his friend instead of his tormentor. Exactly. Liang Chen's voice turned bitter and sharp. You were supposed to keep being the villain, Yuan Feng. You were supposed to make his life miserable so that I could be his comfort and refuge. But instead you became someone he smiles at, someone he trusts, someone he looks at with affection that should belong to me. Do you know how that feels? Watching the person you love fall for someone else. Yuan Feng actually felt a flicker of pity despite everything. So your solution is to kill me and frame me for attacking you both? How does destroying my reputation and ending my life win you Shen Yue's heart? Liang Chen drew his sword, the blade singing as it left the scabbard. Simple. You attacked me in a jealous rage because I discovered your inappropriate relationship with a junior disciple. When Shen Yue and Mei Lin arrive, they will see us fighting. In the struggle, you will tragically fall to your death. Shen Yue will be devastated, and I will be there to comfort him through his grief. Eventually, he will move on and realize I have always been the one who truly cared for him. The twisted logic of it was almost impressive in its delusion. Liang Qin genuinely believed this plan would work, that murder and manipulation would somehow lead to love. Yuan Feng drew his own sword, settling into a defensive stance. You are wrong about everything, Liang Qin. Love built on lies and violence is not real love. The clash of steel against steel rang through the mountain air like a terrible bell announcing doom, and Yuan Feng knew within the first 3 strikes that Liang Qin had been hiding his true skill level for years. Every movement Liang Qin made was precise and deadly, his blade seeking vital points with the efficiency of someone who had trained not for honor or sport but for killing. Yuan Feng parried a strike aimed at his throat, then barely dodged a follow-up slash that would have opened his chest from shoulder to hip. The original Yuan Feng's muscle memory served him well, but he could feel himself being pushed back step by step toward the cliff's crumbling edge where loose stones skittered away into the void below. Liang Qin's face was calm, almost serene as he pressed his attack. There was no anger in his expression, no wild emotion that might create openings Yuan Feng could exploit. Instead, Liang Qin fought with the cold focus of someone executing a plan they had rehearsed 1,000 times in their mind. He feinted left, and when Yuan Feng moved to block, Liang Qin's blade suddenly changed direction, slicing across Yuan Feng's arm and drawing a line of bright red blood that soaked through the blue silk of his sleeve. Pain lanced through Yuan Feng's arm, but he forced himself to ignore it, countering with a spinning strike that made Liang Qin jump backward. For a brief moment they circled each other, both breathing hard, the sunset painting everything in shades of crimson and gold that made the scene look like something from a tragic painting. Yuan Feng could feel the cliff edge behind him, could sense the empty air waiting to swallow him whole. He needed to last just a little longer, needed to keep Liang Qin talking and distracted until Mei Lin and Shen Yue arrived. You know what the truly pathetic part is, Yuan Feng said between breaths, his voice carrying clearly in the evening air. You claim to love Shen Yue, but you do not know the first thing about him. You love an idea, a fantasy you created in your own mind. The real Shen Yue would be horrified by what you are doing right now. Liang Qin's calm facade cracked slightly, his jaw tightening with irritation. Do not presume to tell me about Shen Yue. I have watched him for 2 years, learned his habits, memorized his favorite foods and the poetry he loves. I know him better than anyone. Watching someone is not the same as knowing them, Yuan Feng shot back, shifting his stance to keep his wounded arm protected while maintaining his guard. You have studied him like a hunter studies prey, cataloging details to use for your own purposes. But have you ever actually talked to him about his fears? Do you know why he pushes himself so hard in training, or what nightmares wake him in the middle of the night? Do you know about the little brother he lost before coming to the sect, and how that loss drives everything he does? The flash of surprise in Liang Qin's eyes told Yuan Feng that no, Liang Qin had never bothered to learn these deeper truths. He had been too busy crafting his perfect fantasy to care about the real person beneath. That surprise turned quickly to rage, and Liang Qin attacked with renewed fury, his strikes becoming wilder and more aggressive. Yuan Feng defended desperately, his arm burning with pain, his feet dangerously close to the edge now. Then Liang Qin made his move. He deliberately dropped his guard on his left side, an opening so obvious it had to be a trap, but Yuan Feng had no choice but to take it or be driven completely off the cliff. Yuan Feng lunged forward with his strike, and exactly as Liang Qin had planned, found himself overextended and off balance. Liang Qin's boot caught him in the chest with brutal force, and suddenly Yuan Feng was falling backward with nothing but air beneath his feet and the river roaring its hunger far below. Time seemed to slow as Yuan Feng tumbled over the edge. He saw the darkening sky above him, saw Liang Qin's triumphant smile framed against the sunset, saw the cliff face rushing past as gravity claimed him. His mind, strangely calm in the face of death, thought about Shen Yue and whether the junior disciple would believe Liang Qin's lies. He hoped Mei Lin would be smart enough to question the story, hoped that his death would not be completely meaningless. Then something impossible happened. A hand grabbed his wrist with strength that jolted through his entire body, stopping his fall with a force that nearly dislocated his shoulder. Yuan Feng looked up in shock to see Shen Yue hanging over the cliff's edge, his face twisted with effort and determination, his other hand gripping a twisted tree root that jutted from the rock face. Behind Shen Yue, Yuan Feng could see Mei Lin holding onto Shen Yue's legs, anchoring him, her own face pale with strain. I have you, Shen Yue gasped out, his fingers digging into Yuan Feng's wrist hard enough to bruise. I will not let you fall. I will never let you fall. Above them, Liang Chen's voice rose in false panic. Help. Senior brother Yuan attacked me and Junior Shen tried to save him. They are both going to die. But Mei Lin's sharp voice cut through his performance like a knife through silk. Save your lies, Liang Chen. We saw everything from the trees. We saw you attack first, saw you kick him over the edge. Her tone turned icy with contempt. We may not have arrived when Yuan Feng planned, but we arrived in time to witness your true nature. Shen Yue was pulling Yuan Feng up with strength that seemed impossible for his slender frame, spiritual energy glowing around his arms as he channeled every ounce of his cultivation into the effort. Yuan Feng scrambled to help, finding purchase on the cliff face with his feet and pushing upward while Shen Yue pulled. Inch by agonizing inch, they worked together until finally Yuan Feng's other hand caught the edge and he hauled himself back onto solid ground. For a moment he just lay there gasping, his wounded arms screaming in pain, his heart pounding so hard he thought it might burst from his chest. Then Shen Yue was kneeling beside him, hands frantically checking him for injuries, eyes bright with unshed tears. You promised you would be safe, Shen Yue said, his voice breaking. You promised nothing would happen. Yuan Feng caught one of Shen Yue's trembling hands in his own, squeezing gently despite the pain in his arm. I'm sorry. I had to make sure you both witnessed what Liang Chen truly is. Words alone would not have been enough. Liang Chen stood frozen several feet away, his sword still drawn but his expression shifting rapidly between panic and calculation as he realized his plan had completely fallen apart. Mei Lin had produced a small crystal from her robes, and it glowed with soft blue light that indicated it had been recording everything. This memory crystal has captured the entire fight, she said calmly, though her hands shook slightly as she held it. Every word you spoke, every strike you made, your confession of your twisted plan. The sect elders will see the truth of what happened here. The color drained from Liang Chen's face as the full weight of his failure crashed down on him. He had not just failed to kill Yuan Feng. He had been caught, recorded, his crimes preserved in undeniable magical evidence. His reputation, his position in the sect, his entire future had just crumbled into dust. For a moment Yuan Feng almost felt sorry for him, seeing the desperation and fear in his eyes. Almost but not quite. Liang Chen had chosen this path himself, had chosen murder and manipulation over honesty and genuine connection. You have ruined everything, Liang Chen whispered, and there was genuine anguish in his voice now. I loved him. I truly loved him and you took him from me. Shen Yue stood up, placing himself between Liang Chen and Yuan Feng in a protective stance that made Yuan Feng's heart clench painfully. You never loved me, brother Liang, Shen Yue said quietly, and though his voice was soft it carried absolute conviction. You loved the idea of possessing me, of controlling me. That is not love. Love is what senior brother Yuan showed me when he chose to change, to grow, to become better despite how difficult that must have been. Love is risking your life to protect someone, which he just did by coming here knowing you planned to betray him. Love is trust and honesty in seeing someone for who they truly are, not who you want them to be. Those words hung in the air between them, heavy with meaning that went beyond the current situation. Yuan Feng stared up at Shen Yue's profile, backlit by the rising moon, and felt something shift irrevocably in his chest. This was not just friendship anymore, had not been for a while if he was honest with himself. Somewhere between teaching Shen Yue sword forms and sharing midnight conversations and catching him when he stumbled during practice, Yuan Feng had fallen completely and hopelessly in love. The journey back to the sect took hours. Mei Lin supported Yuan Feng on one side while Shen Yue took the other, Liang Chen walking ahead of them in sullen silence with his hands bound by spiritual ropes Mei Lin had conjured. Yuan Feng's arm throbbed with every step, but he barely noticed the pain. He was too aware of Shen Yue's warmth pressed against his side, too focused on the way their steps synchronized naturally, too distracted by the occasional concerned glances Shen Yue kept giving him when he thought Yuan Feng was not looking. When they finally reached the sect grounds, it was deep night and most disciples were asleep. But Mei Lin insisted on going directly to Master Jiang Wei's residence, and the elderly sect leader answered his door in sleeping robes with a concerned expression that deepened when he saw their disheveled state and Yuan Feng's blood-stained sleeve. They gathered in his study, and Mei Lin played the memory crystal while Master Jiang Wei watched with an expression that grew darker and more disappointed with each passing moment. When the recording finished, showing Liang Chen kicking Yuan Feng off the cliff, Master Jiang Wei closed his eyes as if in pain. Liang Chen, you have brought great shame to this sect and to yourself. You allowed jealousy and obsession to twist you into something unrecognizable. You attempted murder and planned to frame an innocent disciple for crimes he did not commit. He opened his eyes and they were hard as stone. You are hereby expelled from the Heavenly Sword sect. You will leave at first light and never return. Your name will be struck from our records, and you will be fortunate if I do not report this to the authorities for criminal prosecution. Liang Chen's face crumpled, all his schemes and plans reduced to nothing in a single pronouncement. Guards came to take him away to a locked room until morning, and as he was let out he looked back at Shen Yue one last time with desperate longing. But Shen Yue's gaze was fixed on Yuan Feng, checking the bandages a healer had wrapped around his injured arm, and he did not even glance in Liang Chen's direction. After Liang Chen was gone and the healer had finished treating Yuan Feng's wound with spiritual medicine that would have it fully healed within days, Master Jiang Wei turned his attention to Yuan Feng with an expression that was difficult to read. You have changed significantly in recent months, Yuan Feng. The disciple who stood before me now is not the same one who used to bully and torment others. What brought about this transformation? Yuan Feng considered lying, considered making up some easy explanation. But looking at Shen Yue sitting beside him and Mei Lin standing nearby, both of whom had risked themselves to save him, he decided they deserved some version of the truth. I realized I was living my life wrong, Master. I was cruel and petty and I hurt people who did not deserve it. I decided to become someone better, someone worthy of the trust and friendship others might offer me. It has not been easy, but it has been worth it. Master Jiang Wei studied him for a long moment, then nodded slowly. Growth and change are the marks of true cultivation, not just of skills but of character. You have walked a difficult path but you have walked it well. Continue on this road, Yuan Feng, and you may yet become the person you were always meant to be. Those words settled over Yuan Feng like a blessing, and for the first time since waking up in this world, he felt like maybe he belonged here. Maybe this was not some cosmic accident or punishment. Maybe this was a genuine second chance to live a better life, to be a better person, to find connections and meaning he had never known in his previous existence. The next few days passed in a strange blur. News of Liang Chen's expulsion spread through the sect like wildfire, and disciples who had once feared or avoided Yuan Feng began approaching him with cautious curiosity. Some apologized for believing the worst of him. Others thanked him for exposing Liang Chen's true nature before anyone else got hurt. Slowly, carefully, Yuan Feng began building real relationships with his fellow disciples, and the isolation that had defined his existence started to crack and crumble away. But the most significant change was with Shen Yue. The near-death experience had stripped away the last of their carefully maintained barriers, and now there was an openness between them that felt both terrifying and wonderful. They still trained together every morning and ate meals side by side, but now their hands would brush and neither would pull away. Now they would catch each other's eyes across the courtyard and smile for no reason except the joy of seeing each other. Now they would stay up late talking about nothing and everything, sitting so close their shoulders touched, neither wanting to be the first to leave. 3 months after the incident at Moon Cliff, on a warm spring evening when the cherry blossoms were blooming in clouds of pink and white, Shen Yue asked Yuan Feng to walk with him in the gardens. They wandered the familiar paths in comfortable silence until they reached the oldest tree in the sect grounds, a massive cherry tree that was said to have been planted by the sect's founder centuries ago. Beneath its spreading branches, surrounded by fallen petals that carpeted the ground like snow, Shen Yue stopped and turned to face Yuan Feng. I have something for you, Shen Yue said, his voice soft but steady. From his robes he pulled a small jade pendant carved in the shape of 2 cranes in flight, their wings intertwined. In my family we have a tradition. When someone finds the person they want to spend their life beside, they give them a crane pendant. Cranes mate for life, you see. They choose one partner and remain loyal through all seasons, all hardships, all joys. Yuan Feng's breath caught in his throat as Shen Yue placed the pendant in his hands. The jade was warm from being carried close to Shen Yue's heart, and it gleamed softly in the fading light. Shen Yue, this is a promise, Shen Yue finished, and now there was the faintest tremor in his voice that betrayed his nervousness despite his brave words. I know we are young. I know there is much we still do not know about the future. But I know my own heart and I know that I want you in my life for all the days to come. You changed for me, became better for me, and in doing so you showed me what real love looks like. Not possession or obsession, but partnership and growth and choosing each other every day. Yuan Feng closed his fingers around the pendant, feeling its solid weight, its reality, its promise. He thought about the story he had read in his previous life, about how it had ended with the villain being discarded and forgotten. But that story was gone now, replaced by something infinitely better and more complex and more real. He had died and been reborn into a tale that should have destroyed him, but instead he had found friendship and purpose and love that filled all the empty spaces in his soul he had not even known existed. I have spent my whole life, both lives, never really belonging anywhere, Yuan Feng said quietly, meeting Shen Yue's eyes and finding endless warmth reflected there. But with you I finally feel like I have found home. Not a place but a person. You are my home, Shen Yue. Today, tomorrow, and for as long as you will have me. Shen Yue's smile was brighter than all the stars beginning to emerge in the darkening sky above them. He stepped forward and carefully, gently, reverently, placed his hands on either side of Yuan Feng's face and kissed him. It was soft and sweet and perfect, tasting of cherry blossoms and promise and new beginnings. When they finally pulled apart, both were smiling so hard their cheeks hurt, and neither could seem to let go of the other. They stood there beneath the ancient tree as night fell completely and lanterns began to light throughout the sect grounds, two people who had found each other against all odds and chosen love over hatred, growth over stagnation, hope over despair. Yuan Feng had come to this world expecting to be the villain of someone else's story, but instead he had become the hero of his own. And as Shen Yue leaned against his shoulder, fitting perfectly against his side like he had always belonged there, Yuan Feng knew that this was just the beginning of their adventure together. The original story had ended with a cliff and a fall and a villain being erased from the narrative. But this new story, the one Yuan Feng had written with his choices and his courage and his willingness to change, this story would continue on into a future bright with possibility. And somewhere in that future he and Shen Yue would face challenges and triumphs together, two cranes flying side by side through whatever storms or sunshine came their way, their wings forever intertwined. What story will you write for yourself? Will you choose growth over comfort, love over fear, change over stagnation? The pen is in your hands and the pages are waiting. What happens next is entirely up to you.